On this Saturday night, the right to strike, the grinding rail halt, and the growing cost to the Canadian economy.
Our income has stopped and has stopped until they actually go back to work.
The sector's getting hit the hardest. When will it end? Stranded in space.
Space flight is risky. Our core value is safety, and it is our North Star.
The agonizing wait to return to Earth as days turn to months. Goodbye to baseball.
I think we were more of a Blue Jays household.
One-on-one with Canada's homegrown Major League star, Joey Votto. And making a comeback.
To taste part of our history.
Really, really juicy. Delicious.
The juicy story about the revival and rich heritage of Montreal's favorite fruit.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Eric Sorensen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news out of Ottawa tonight, where the Federal Labour Board is ordering striking rail workers back to work. We still don't know exactly when thousands of rail employees will be back on the job. Today marked day 3 of a major disruption of Canada's 2 main railways. Many Canadians may not have noticed the impact, at least not yet, but the costs to the Canadian economy have been mounting. When companies or even individual businesses can't get their shipments in time, it costs money. $341 million each day, according to the ratings agency Moody's. The sectors that are hardest hit, agriculture and the auto industry. But even something as simple as drinking water supply can be affected if communities can't get their chlorine shipments. The hope now is that the trains will be back in motion by Monday, which can't come soon enough for those who depend on them. Here's Caryn Lieberman.
A federal labor board decision will spell out next steps in a months-long bitter contract dispute between the top 2 rail companies and their workers' unions.
These people are working long hours. They are spending a lot of time away from home.
These companies are making record profits. And what happens now? They're not considered heroes. The company locked them out and they're considering zeros.
Ottawa turned to the Labour Board Thursday to get the parties to binding arbitration after workers were locked out, triggering a rail stoppage and threatening economic chaos.
In the lead up to the contract deadline, the employers repeatedly asked for binding arbitration. And then, as the deadline approached, they shut down their own rail network. The government essentially caved and gave the employers what they want.
The Teamsters union, representing nearly 10,000 conductors, locomotive engineers and others, plans to challenge that government decision, suggesting it's unconstitutional and it plans to strike. CN said Friday, while it's focused on its recovery plan, the Teamsters are focused on returning to the picket line and shutting down the economy, impacting people and jobs. There is no question the daily cost is high. Canadian grain farmer growers alone are losing $40 to $50 million a day.
A lot of us have contracted, some of our grain, some of our production to sell, off the combine or as soon as we can possibly haul it. And we can't right now. So basically, our income has stopped until they actually go back to work and the rail companies are actually running full steam.
Meanwhile, thousands of commuters face continued travel misery as a shutdown also impacts some passenger trains.
I think a lot of stress for parents that have to go and get their kids at the end of the day.
I don't expect it to be open for at least a couple more weeks.
Caryn Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
There is growing opposition to another contentious pipeline project in British Columbia. The 800-kilometre line is being built to move more fracked natural gas from northeastern BC to export facilities on the coast. On Thursday, hereditary chiefs, supported by dozens of youth from nearby communities, burned a contract they'd signed years ago supporting the pipeline. To delay construction, the chiefs have set up a roadblock next to a Forest Service road about 170 kilometres north of Terrace. They want to make it difficult to build a camp for the 1,000 or so workers that will be needed to complete the project. The chiefs say they've changed their minds 10 years after the initial contract was signed because of the worsening climate emergency and the environmental damage caused by another pipeline, the Coastal GasLink, that was completed last year. 2 days after New Brunswick declared a whooping cough outbreak, Quebec is reporting a major surge. Quebec's health ministry says there have been more than 11,000 cases of whooping cough or pertussis so far this year. A third of the cases are in children aged 10 to 14. Whooping cough tends to peak every 2 to 5 years. The last peak for transmission in Quebec was in 2019, before COVID, so a surge in cases was expected. Pertussis can be especially dangerous for infants under age 1, but Quebec Health says vaccinations are effective in protecting children. The man who guided the United States through the COVID pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci, was hospitalized after being infected with West Nile virus. A spokesperson says Fauci is now back at home and expected to make a full recovery. West Nile is commonly spread by infected mosquitoes. Symptoms can include fever, body aches, vomiting, or a rash. In under 1% of cases, the illness can be serious or fatal. The 2 astronauts stuck in space aren't coming back to Earth anytime soon. Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore will now have to stay on the International Space Station until next February. NASA says the pair will return on a SpaceX craft rather than the Boeing Starliner that took them into space because its faulty propulsion system is just too risky. As Jayme Doll reports, what was meant to be an 8-day trip is turning into an 8-month misadventure.
And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V.
It was a historic ascent into space marred with setbacks. And while Boeing Starliner did successfully deliver its 2 astronauts, their mission just got a whole lot longer.
NASA has decided that Butch and Sunny will return with Crew 9 next February, and that Starliner will return uncrewed.
Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams have already been at the International Space Station for over 2 months, following their June 6th test launch that didn't go as smoothly as hoped.
Now less than 3 meters away from the International Space Station.
As the capsule approached the ISS, some of its thrusters failed, stranding the astronauts. They will now come home early next year aboard a SpaceX Dragon ferry ship.
We have had mistakes done in the past. We lost 2 space shuttles as a result of there not being a culture in which information could come forward. Space flight is risky, even at its safest. Our core value is safety, and it is our North Star.
Welcome aboard the International Space Station first. It's a great place to be, a great place to live, a great place to work.
This is the 3rd test flight for the veteran astronauts who have been preparing for everything and anything.
Failure is not an option. That's why we are staying here now.
Canada's newest appointed astronaut says if anyone can handle a longer mission, it's Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams.
This is an incredible time in human spaceflight, and we have to be prepared for suboptimal outcomes, bumps along the road, and just we have to be committed to working the problem when these bumps arise and doing so in the safest and most risk mitigatory fashion possible.
NASA and Boeing say they have made significant progress in understanding what went wrong with the thrusters, and the helium leaks have stabilized. Starliner could be back unmanned as early as September 6th.
We are still in the middle of a test flight. We have to remain vigilant. We need to get the vehicle back on deck.
It's an out-of-this-world story hitting 2 families very close to home.
Yeah, you just sort of have to roll with it, and you sort of expect the unexpected.
There could be more of that in the months ahead. Jayme Doll, Global News, Calgary.
Prosecutors in Italy have opened a manslaughter investigation into the sinking of that super yacht. The luxury sailboat capsized during a storm off the coast of Sicily last week. 7 people died. Investigators are trying to figure out how a sailing vessel deemed unsinkable by its manufacturer went down so quickly. Prosecutors say they'll consider each possible element of responsibility. The so-called Islamic State is claiming responsibility for a deadly mass stabbing Friday in western Germany. Police say they are searching for the man who killed 3 people at a festival and injured 8 others. Late tonight, police did arrest an individual but didn't provide any further detail. Today, mourners arrived at the site of the attack west of Dusseldorf, laying flowers and paying respects to the 3 victims. Police had already arrested a 15-year-old boy they believe had knowledge of the planned attack, but they said he is not the main suspect. Toronto police are searching for a man wanted in connection with the killings of 2 of his family members. 2 women were found dead in a home yesterday afternoon in the city's West End. Joe Scarpelli has more on the investigation that has shocked the community.
How'd this happen? Why did it happen? You know, that's what I want to know.
It's the question everybody's asking after police found 2 women dead in this home during a wellness check. Police say they were called here by a concerned relative. Linda Robinson grew up across the street.
I was shocked. I was shocked. Like when I heard this, I kind of cried because I always saw her outside. We would have talks, and I said, you know, I love it when you talk about the old times and things you used to do and stuff like that.
Robinson says she spoke with the suspect's grandmother often, and multiple neighbors tell us the suspect's mother also lived in the home. Police have not identified either of them, but say the man they're looking for is 33-year-old Joseph Ayala.
He wasn't bad, a little strange, but not bad. Like, he'd say hello, and then off he'd go, not even bother talking.
Police say he's known to wear a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and a cowboy-style jacket. This woman who lives nearby told police she thinks she saw him passing her house just hours before police got the call.
I recognized the hat. He had a cowboy hat on, a fringed jacket, he had a backpack, and it was about 8 or 8:30 in the morning. Now it concerns me if he's not been found, that he's in somebody's garden shed, and he'll still show up, so we'll keep our doors locked, that's for sure.
Investigators continue to canvass the neighborhood Saturday afternoon as they look for the suspect and for the answers to the questions that so many people in this tight-knit community have on their mind. Eric?
Joe Scarpelli in Toronto. Thank you. Coming up, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump begin the final sprint to Election Day. As Ukraine pushes forward with its cross-border incursion into Russia's Kursk region, today the 2 sides exchanged 230 prisoners of war. The United Arab Emirates reportedly mediated the swap. 115 prisoners from each side handed over. Kyiv says one of the goals of the offensive, which is the largest attack inside Russian territory by a foreign power since the Second World War, is to capture Russian soldiers to trade for Ukrainian prisoners. Ukraine claims to be in control of more than 1,000 square kilometers of the Russian region. As those prisoners were released, today Ukraine paused to mark its 33rd Independence Day. President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to take revenge on Russia for its invasion and paid tribute to the sacrifice of fallen soldiers during a ceremony in Kyiv. Zelensky says Ukraine's goal is to force Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war through diplomacy. The embattled campaign of former U.S. President Donald Trump is hoping that an endorsement from third-party candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will give him a boost in battleground states. On Friday, Kennedy said he was suspending his campaign in 10 states and endorsing Trump. It was a calculated move. Take a look. When the race was between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Kennedy, as the third-party candidate, had about 11% of the vote. That's probably because many voters were feeling uninspired about another Biden-Trump campaign. But since Kamala Harris has assumed the mantle of the Democrats, the prospect of a third-party candidate has looked less appealing, prompting Kennedy to throw his support to Trump, who trails Harris in a close race.
And don't you want a president who's going to get us out of the wars and who's going to rebuild the middle class in this country?
Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, are also ramping up their campaign in battleground states with a swing through Georgia beginning on Monday. Ahead, the path to greatness. A Canadian legend on the ball field, Joey Votto, tells me what inspired him to become one of the best. The Paralympic flame has been lit in the British village of Stoke Manville, widely considered the birthplace of the Paralympic Games. The flame will now travel to France under the English Channel for a 4-day torch relay, ending in Paris on Wednesday, just in time for the opening ceremonies. The end of an era came this week when Joey Votto unexpectedly announced his retirement. He's one of the greatest Canadian baseball players in history. After a career in Cincinnati, he was trying to make a comeback with his hometown Toronto Blue Jays, but after an ankle injury, just never got called up. We sat down with Votto in Buffalo 2 weeks ago. He was still eager to join the Blue Jays, and we started with the picture he posted last spring of one-year-old Joey declaring, "It's official, I'm now a little Blue Jay."
My mom sent that to me right around when I signed with the Jays. I think we were more of a Blue Jays household, certainly watching the team, and then obviously the couple championships in the early 90s, which were, highlights of our family's life.
Was that what was hooking you on baseball, or was it your dad taking you out to play some catch?
Well, the playing catch with him certainly was a factor. It was a sport that just, you just move towards it. It just feels natural. I got better quick. I think that was the appeal. And
what were you good at?
I just got better at everything I tried to get better at, but I was drawn to it. It called to me. I just kept showing up at the facility or hitting in my garage or taking swings outdoor or indoor at the house.
Joey Votto, 6'2", Richview Collegiate High School in Toronto, Canada.
Probably at about 14, 15 years old was when I started really focusing in on it.
Did you have a moment when you felt you were going to make it, or you had made it? Was it the draft?
I had doubts as a high schooler because there were so few examples in our community, and I would look at old Scouting Bureau videos, and they had I would go home every single day and watch first-round picks, second-round picks, the Joe Mauers. What did they do? How do I keep up with them? What sort of skill set do they have?
You made it. Were you surprised at how well you played pretty early in your career?
Yeah, I would say everything's been a surprise, but I've had big goals in my career. And I put in the work, but the work never felt like work. It's always been just a passion.
You signed a very big contract about 10 years ago. Did that change you at all?
Sure.
How so? Professionally or personally?
Well, professionally, it put a great deal of pressure on me. I didn't want the attention of having a contract that was a failure. I didn't want to embarrass the organization.
Do you think in terms of your legacy?
No, I like the idea of not looking back. I like the idea of moving on to something else in my life. So looking backwards, I think I may give it a split second, but I think I'll move on pretty quickly.
Do you think about what you might do? Because there could be something still in baseball later. It could be coaching or managing or broadcasting.
I don't think about that. I have the heart for this right now. I feel like real love for this. And I'm going to keep giving everything I have, and if it breaks my heart or if I fall flat on my face, that's okay. I did everything I could.
Bringing back a seedy legend. Next, the resurgence of the Montreal melon. A Canadian hit all the right notes at this year's Air Guitar World Championships in Finland. Zachary Knowles, known by his stage name Ichabod Fame, is taking home the top prize. He outplayed some tough competition, including Shred Lasso and Guitarantula. Judges score based on originality, stage presence, technical merit, artistic impression, and airness. A species once thought to be extinct is having a resurgence in its namesake city. It's the Montreal melon, a sought-after delicacy, popular among society's elite in the late 19th century. But as Montreal's farmland gave way to roads and buildings, the fruit disappeared. Now, thanks to a local initiative, Dan Spector reports that the Montreal melon is having a moment.
It's a taste test more than a century in the making. This small group has gathered to try some freshly grown Montreal melon, a once coveted fruit that's in the midst of making a comeback after nearly going extinct.
Really juicy, delicious.
To taste part of our history.
The Montreal melon was a favorite among the upper echelons of society in the 1800s and early 1900s. It was grown widely along the St. Lawrence River, including in the fertile farmlands of Montreal. Aristocrats in New York and Boston could not get enough.
It was sold $1 or $2 the slice, which to today's equivalent is something like $35 the slice, which is insane.
But as development of Montreal took over, the melon faded away.
It's a little hard to believe now, but this entire area was farmland back in the 1800s and early 1900s. The DeCarry Expressway was just a small route for horse-drawn carriages.
Essentially, it stopped being produced, and the seeds were then lost.
By the 1950s, the Montreal melon had all but disappeared. But in 1996, some seeds were discovered in an Iowa seed bank after some intrepid research by a Montreal Gazette journalist. Since then, efforts to bring back the missing melon have been multiplying. An urban farming organization is now growing them at the site of the former Bluebonnets horse racing track, where they were likely grown a century ago.
We had about 25 plants, and each can produce many fruits.
They selected 6 different specimens to see which one is the best. Some are better than others.
Not that tasty.
Melon 6 was the clear winner, but for some the experience is about much more than the flavor. Pierre Cardinal's grandfather was a Montreal melon farmer, but this was the first time he ever tried it. It tastes just the way my father described it, he says. The urban farmers will replant the seeds of sweet number 6 next year in hopes of breeding the best possible Montreal melon. Theirs are not going to the rich and famous, but to a food bank they've partnered with. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Montreal melon. And that's Global National for this Saturday night. Tonight's Your Canada is the Smoky Hollow Waterfall in Hamilton, Ontario. I'm Eric Sorensen. Thanks for watching.